At 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, Naomi Okafor stood in the pantry of the Ardmore estate and looked at the same spreadsheet she had been looking at for 41 days. The number at the bottom had not changed, 41 days. That was how long the building had left before the bank took it back. 41 days of unpaid vendors, of skipped payroll, of pretending. 2 floors above her, in a ballroom paid for with money her father did not have, her older sister Brielle was being introduced to the man who would, by 8:14 a.m. Friday morning, own every brick of this property in ways no one in that room could yet imagine. He had not come for her sister. He had not come for the introduction her father had spent 6 weeks arranging. He had not come for the Carolina Herrera gown costing $4,217.83 they could not afford. He had not come for the candlelight or the rehearsed laughter floating down the staircase. He had come to find out who was actually keeping the building from falling, and no one, not one soul, had thought to tell Naomi to come upstairs. If this story moves you, stay with me to the end. What happens in the next 90 minutes inside that ballroom will rearrange every life in that house, including one no one in the room has even thought about yet. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from and your local time right now. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe the people who hold everything together deserve to be seen, subscribe. Because there are people in your own life who fit this story, and by the time we're done, you'll know exactly who they are. The summer of 2024 arrived in Westchester County like a verdict. The heat had not broken in 11 days. The rosemary Naomi had trimmed at 6:22 a.m. the previous morning already lay flat against the brick borders of the south garden, defeated. The temperature gauge on the kitchen wall read 97 degrees at 4:11 p.m., and the air conditioning unit in the east wing, a Mitsubishi installed in 2009, 2 units short of what the property actually required, was losing the fight 1 degree at a time. Inside the Ardmore estate, things were worse. Reginald Okafor stood at the foot of the main staircase in a navy Brioni suit that no longer quite fit at the shoulders and bellowed up at no one in particular. Where are those candles? I ordered 40 candles and I see perhaps 12. Naomi. She was already coming through the side corridor with a crate in her arms. 36 candles, Papa. I couldn't source more than that on 2 days' notice. The chandler in White Plains is expecting payment on the November invoice before he extends further credit. Reginald's jaw tightened. Don't speak to me about credit tonight. Someone has to. She set the crate down on the demaloon table by the staircase and straightened. The crate had cost $41 in delivery fees alone. She had paid it out of her own Chase checking account at 11:48 that morning because the estate visa had been declined for the 3rd time that week. Han Ji-hoon's car will pull into the drive at 7:30, she said. I suggest we have the candles lit before then. He looked at her, really looked for 1 full second, before his eyes slid away toward the staircase, toward the sound of Brielle's voice floating down from the 2nd-floor gallery. They always slid away. Make sure your sister is ready. He walked away. Naomi watched him go. She did not sigh. She had learned at 17, the year her mother died, the year her father stopped opening the mail, that sighing cost energy she could not afford. Brielle Okafor descended the staircase at 7:20 in a gown the color of winter cream. Her hair, lightened 2 shades at Frederique Fekkai on Madison the previous Tuesday, fell in careful waves past her shoulders. Her makeup had been done at home by a freelance artist named Tanya, who was owed $800 and had been promised, again, payment by Monday. She was 28 years old and beautiful in the way their mother had been beautiful. Openly, effortlessly, the kind of beauty the glossy magazines had spent 100 years pretending was the only kind that counted. Brielle had absorbed that pretense the way some children absorb hymns. She believed it without ever having been told. She paused on the 3rd step. Do I look right? You look perfect, Naomi said, because it was true. Brielle smoothed her gloves, long ivory things ordered from a costume shop in Yonkers because Papa had said gloves would signal something to a Korean man of breeding. Naomi had not bothered to correct him. Their father's understanding of Korean breeding had been formed by a 1997 episode of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous and 4 pages of a Wikipedia article he had read on his phone in the bathroom. Papa says Mr. Han is a widower, Brielle said. 40 years old, no children, very serious. He's 32, Naomi said. And serious is how people describe men who have learned not to trust the people around them. Brielle blinked. How do you know that? I read his business correspondence when Papa left it on the desk. Naomi adjusted one of the candelabras near the entry, the brass one their grandmother had brought from Lagos in 1981, the only object in the foyer that was not currently financed. He's been cheated by 3 different property management firms in the past 2 years. He'll be looking for honesty more than charm tonight. Brielle was quiet for a moment, then she said very softly, So he won't like me. I didn't say that. You implied it. Naomi turned to face her. For one strange second, she saw something in her sister's expression she had not expected. Not vanity, not entitlement, but something closer to fear. The face of a woman who had been told her entire purpose for 28 years was to be looked at, and who had recently begun to suspect that the people doing the looking had never actually seen her. The moment passed. Brielle straightened. "Well," she said, in a voice that almost sounded like their mother's, "try to stay out of sight tonight, okay? Papa doesn't want him confused about which of us he came to meet." She descended the last 3 steps at the mob toward the ballroom, ivory gloves trailing behind her like a banner from a war no one had told her she was losing. Naomi stood where she was. She turned back to the candles. She lit the 13th one. She let the wax drip onto the pad of her thumb, watched it harden into a small white ridge, and did not pull her hand away. 3 feet to her left, on the demaloon table beside the crate, lay an unopened FedEx envelope addressed to Reginald Okafor, in the careful block letters of a sender who used physical mail on purpose. The return address was a P.O. box in Fort Lee, New Jersey. The company name read Greylock Holdings, LLC. Naomi did not look at it. She had no idea, in that moment, that the envelope contained a draft purchase agreement valued at $1.2 million that her father had been negotiating with its sender for 19 days behind her back, and that the men who owned Greylock Holdings had spent the last 18 months hunting for exactly the kind of failing Northeast property the Ardmore estate had become, for reasons that had nothing to do with hospitality, and everything to do with moving very large amounts of money in ways no one could trace. She did not know any of that yet. What she knew was that it was 7:29 p.m., and the man arriving in 4 minutes had already spent 2 weeks reading every Yelp review, every property tax filing, every county lien attached to the Ardmore estate. And he had not come for Brielle. Han Ji-hoon arrived at 7:33 p.m., which told Naomi 2 things immediately. He was not a man who ran early to impress people, and he was not a man who ran late out of carelessness. He had arrived at precisely the moment that suited him and no other. She did not see him come through the front door. She was in the kitchen at that moment, arguing quietly with the delivery driver from Empire Wine and Spirits, a thin man in his 40s named Hector who was insisting he could not leave the cases without some form of payment against the outstanding account. "I understand your position," Naomi said evenly. "But it's 7:33 on a Thursday evening, and your manager's ledger is not going to change between now and Monday morning. Leave the bottles. I'll wire 1,840 by close of business Friday." "Mrs. Okafor, I can't." "You can. Because if you take those cases back up I-684 tonight, your manager doesn't just lose the receivable. He loses the future business of the Ardmore estate, and I will personally call Empire's headquarters in Bayonne on Monday morning to explain exactly why we were forced to source our wine elsewhere." Hector stared at her. She looked back at him with perfect calm. He left the bottles. Naomi exhaled, carried the first case toward the prep counter, and went back to work. By 9, the ballroom was crowded and loud and 10 degrees hotter than the rest of the building. The string trio her father had hired, 3 musicians from Hastings-on-Hudson billing $1,150 for the evening that no one in the room could currently pay, bounced their Bach off the original 1947 plaster moldings, and the candlelight pooled in the gilded mirrors above the bar. Naomi moved along the outer edges of all of it. She caught a champagne flute before it tipped off a passing tray. She redirected a guest who had wandered toward the private office where the bank statements were stacked. She whispered to Marcela Reyes, 51 years old, born in Oaxaca, raised in the Bronx, head of housekeeping since 2006, that the cold buffet needed to come out 20 minutes early because the cream sauces were turning in the heat. She did not dance. She was not asked. She was wearing the staff uniform she had set for herself 8 years ago. White button-down, black trousers, low black flats. She had arranged her hair, the box braids Marcella had retightened 3 weeks ago, into a single low knot. She wore no jewelry except a small gold stud in each ear that had belonged to her mother. She was not invisible, exactly. People saw her. They simply saw through her to whatever task she appeared to be moving toward, and then they looked away. That was fine. She preferred it. What she did not prefer was standing still, which she was forced to do for one brief moment near the east window at 9:43 p.m., when her feet absolutely refused to carry her another step without rest. She had been awake since 4:18 that morning. She leaned one shoulder against the wall and closed her eyes for 3 seconds. When she opened them, a man was watching her from across the room. She noticed him not because he was handsome, though he was, in a severe, unsmiling way, but because he was standing in the center of a crowd that was actively performing for him, and he was not watching any of it. He was watching her. Han Ji-hoon was tall, perhaps 6'1", in a Tom Ford suit cut close to the body in charcoal so dark it read black under the chandeliers. His hair was clean cropped at the sides, slightly longer on top, no product. He had the posture of a man who owned things, not aggressively, but with the settled stillness of someone who had stopped needing to prove it. 2 steps to his left stood a younger man in a navy suit and wireframe glasses, holding a phone face down at his hip. Naomi clocked him as security or counsel or both. She did not yet know his name was Min Jae and that the phone was already recording audio. 2 steps to Ji-hoon's right stood Brielle, radiant and composed, saying something that made several nearby guests laugh. Ji-hoon was not laughing. He was still watching Naomi. She looked away first. She pushed off the wall and went back to work. At 9:55 p.m., her father found her near the kitchen corridor. There you are. He gripped her elbow above the bone, the same place he had gripped it for 20 years, the place where the skin had thickened into a quiet callus, and steered her back toward the wall. What are you doing skulking back here? Go to the kitchen. Stay there until the guests start to leave. Why? Don't be obtuse. Han keeps glancing toward this side of the room, and I will not have him distracted. Naomi looked at her father. You mean distracted from Brielle? I mean distracted from the purpose of this evening, which is not your concern. The Hendersons' Bentley arrived with a flat tire. I've asked Thomas Reyes to look at it. Thomas is at his daughter's recital in Tarrytown. I asked Marcella's nephew to take the lug nuts off. He's on it. For one instant, her father's eyes lost focus. The brief, helpless look of a man who had just been reminded again that he did not know how his own house ran. Then he straightened his lapels and walked away. It was 10:08 when the man in the navy suit and the wire-frame glasses came into the kitchen. Naomi was at the prep counter rewrapping a wheel of brie that had begun to weep at the edges. She did not look up immediately. She had spent 8 years being approached by men who wanted something, and she had learned to make them wait the 4 extra seconds it took to find out who they were before she gave them her face. Mrs. Okafor. His accent was East Coast, second generation, with the precise diction of someone who had attended Choate or Andover and made a conscious decision afterward to soften nothing. My name is Park Min Jae. I work with Mr. Han. Yes, he would like a word with you, in the private office at the end of the South Hall. Naomi set down the cheese knife. She wiped her hands on the linen towel at her hip. Flour at one knuckle, blue ink at the inside of her right forefinger from the ledger she had been balancing at 6:14 that morning. He understands the office is closed to guests. He understands. He opened the door himself 11 minutes ago. He has been sitting there since. Min Jae's expression was perfectly neutral. There was something careful in it, though, the practiced calm of a man delivering a message he found interesting. He has been watching you work for the better part of 2 hours, Miss Okafor. He has questions. About the house, about the estate, about you. Naomi looked down at her hands. She thought about her mother's earrings. She thought about the FedEx envelope on the Demaloon table that she had not opened. She thought about the 41 days at the bottom of her spreadsheet, and what answers, exactly, she was willing to give to a stranger who had spent 2 hours watching what she actually was. Tell him I'll come in 5 minutes. She washed her hands. She did not change her shirt. The private office at the end of the South Hall had been built in 1947 as a smoking room for men who had returned from a war and decided they had earned the right to be alone with a glass of bourbon and a closed door. The bookshelves were walnut. The desk was a partner's desk her grandfather had bought at an estate sale in Tuxedo Park in 1986. The window looked east toward the river. Han Ji-hoon was standing at the bookshelf when Naomi entered, which was notable because the office was technically closed. He had simply opened the door and walked in. He turned when she appeared. He had taken off his suit jacket and folded it over the back of the chair by the desk. The white of his shirt was the only bright thing in the room. Miss Okafor. Mr. Han. She stopped 4 feet inside the door and looked at him directly. She did not move toward the chair he had clearly placed at an angle for her. I'll stand, thank you. I've been on my feet since 5:30. Something shifted in his expression. Not offense. Something closer to attention, the look of a man who had just identified, in the first sentence, the kind of conversation he was about to have. Your father tells me the estate runs smoothly. My father is optimistic, and you're not. I'm accurate, Mr. Han. The estate runs. Whether it runs well depends on your definition of the word. He looked at her for a long moment. Behind him on the bookshelf, the brass clock that had stopped working in 2019 read 4:42, as it had read at 4:42 for the past 5 years. The wine at this evening's reception, he said. Good vintage. Well chilled despite the heat, that was you. The vendor was reluctant. I persuaded him. The Bentley out front. I'm told the tire was changed in under 40 minutes. Marcella Reyes' nephew is 23 and works at a Pep Boys in Yonkers. He was very fast. The cold buffet came out at 9:20 instead of 9:40. The cream sauces were turning. It would have been a disaster otherwise. Your father was unaware of all of this. It was not a question. Naomi did not treat it as one. Yes. Ji-hoon nodded slowly. He moved away from the bookshelf, took 2 steps toward the window, and stopped. The river was a strip of black at the bottom of the lawn. May I ask you something direct, Ms. Okafor? I'd prefer it to the alternative. A very brief, very controlled expression crossed his face that might in a different room have been the beginning of a smile. How long have you been running this house? She considered the question honestly. Since I was 18. My mother died in February of my freshman year at NYU. I came home in March. I have not gone back. And your father? My father manages relationships, social obligations, the public face of the Ardmore estate. She met his eyes. I manage everything else. He was quiet for a long beat. Outside the office door, the music rose and fell. The trio had moved from Bach to something jazzy or something easier, an arrangement of The Way You Look Tonight, being performed with the gentle competence of musicians who had played the same piece at 300 Westchester weddings. Somewhere in the ballroom, Brielle was laughing at something clever. The evening was proceeding exactly as her father had planned it. The Ardmore accounts, Ji-hoon said. Are they as healthy as your father has suggested in his correspondence with my acquisitions team? Naomi looked at him steadily. No. How bad? Bad enough that this evening's reception was funded by a credit line that cannot be repaid before the close of the third quarter. We owe Hanover Capital $487,000 on a balloon note due September 14th. We owe the IRS $62,000 in deferred payroll taxes from 2022. We owe the Chandler in White Plains $1,940. The Caldwell estate has filed a boundary dispute that needs an attorney before the October hearing, or we lose 3.1 acres of riverfront, which is the only collateral left that the bank has not already encumbered. She paused. I am telling you this because you asked me a direct question and you seem like a man who has been lied to enough times to recognize the difference. The silence stretched. He looked at her the way she imagined judges looked at witnesses they had decided to believe. You're not going to soften that. Would you like me to? No. He moved back to the desk and sat on the edge of it. He folded his hands on his knee. The signet ring on his right little finger was platinum. Very plain, engraved on the inside in hangul she could not read from where she stood. Mrs. Okafor, I want you to listen carefully because I am going to tell you something that is going to make the next 4 minutes of this conversation difficult. She did not move. My acquisitions team has been studying the Ardmore estate for 14 months. Not because I am interested in boutique hospitality. I am not. I am interested in this property because in the last 18 months, 3 separate failing Northeast estates have been purchased at distress prices by a shell company called Greylock Holdings, LLC, registered in Fort Lee, New Jersey, owned through 2 Delaware LLCs by a family in Seoul that my father spent 40 years trying to keep out of legitimate business. The brass clock did not tick. It had not ticked in 5 years. Your father has been negotiating with Greylock for 19 days. There is a draft purchase agreement valued at $1.2 million sitting on a demaloon table in your foyer in an unopened FedEx envelope. He intends to sign it on Monday morning. If he does, your family's name will be attached, in ways that cannot be undone, to a property that will be used over the next 48 months to move approximately $90 million of cash through the American banking system on behalf of people who killed my wife 3 years ago in a staged accident on the Han River Bridge. Naomi's hand found the edge of the bookshelf behind her. She had not realized she had stepped back. I did not come here tonight to choose a wife, Miss Okafor. I came here to find out whether the person actually running this building knew what her father was about to sign. I have my answer. He stood up. He picked up a black leather folder from the desk and held it out to her, not toward her face, but at the level of her hands, the way you offer a glass of water to someone you are not sure can still hold one. This is a counteroffer. KH Acquisitions LLC will purchase a controlling interest in the Ardmore estate at $1.83 million, with one non-negotiable condition. The signing party from the Okafor family is you, not your father. You have until 8:14 a.m. on Friday morning to make a decision. If you decline, I will withdraw the offer by noon and your father will sign the Greylock agreement before sundown. I cannot stop him. Only you can. She did not take the folder. She looked at him. Why me? Because the only person in this house who has told me the truth in the last 2 hours is you. He set the folder on the desk between them. I will be in the ballroom for another 40 minutes. After that, I am going home. Whatever you decide it for yourself. Not for him. Not for me. Not for your sister. He picked up his jacket. He walked past her toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped without turning around. Miss Okafor, your mother. The earrings. What about them? My mother wore the same ones, small gold studs. She bought them at a market in Busan in 1979. She wore them every day for 41 years until the day she died. He paused. Women who are holding their families together tend to wear small jewelry. I noticed. He opened the door and left. She did not sleep. She read the folder at the kitchen table from 12:14 a.m. until 4:47, with one of her mother's earrings pressed against her bottom lip the way her mother used to press a pen there when she was thinking. The folder contained 28 pages, a forensic accounting of Greylock Holdings, a wire diagram of the Park Jung family's shell network across 3 continents, a copy of the New York State Department of Financial Services consent order that had quietly been issued against a Greylock subsidiary in March, and at the very back, a single sheet of paper that had nothing to do with the deal at all. It was the death certificate of Han Yujin, cause blunt force trauma. Date, October 11, 2021. Place Han River Bridge, southbound lane 3, 2:43 a.m. He had included it on purpose. He wanted her to know what she was being asked to stand next to. At 7:46 Friday morning, Naomi knocked on her father's bedroom door. He answered in his bathrobe, half a coffee in his hand, the unopened FedEx envelope from the Demaloon table tucked under his arm like a newspaper. He had clearly been planning to read it that morning over breakfast. Some part of him had been waiting until the guests left, and the daughters were quiet and no one would interrupt his decision. Naomi, I am not in the mood. Papa, I need you to sit down. I said I am not. Greylock Holdings is a shell company controlled by a criminal organization out of Seoul. The $1.2 million is not an offer. It is a deposit on a laundering operation that will attach your name to $90 million of dirty money over the next 4 years. If you sign that envelope this morning, you will not lose the Ardmore. You will lose the right to ever again sit in the same room as either of your daughters. He stared at her. For 1 second, she saw something move across his face that she had not seen since her mother's funeral. Not anger, not pride, but the raw, dropped-floor look of a man who had just understood that he had misjudged not one decision, but every decision he had made in the last 8 years. Then his jaw set. You have been talking to Han. I have been reading. Han gave me the documents. I read them. And what does he want in exchange? My signature, not yours, on a counter offer. He laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had been losing for so long he no longer recognized what winning sounded like. So that is how he gets it, through my daughter. Clever boy. Papa. Your mother, he said, and stopped. He sat down on the edge of his bed. Your mother did not die of pancreatic cancer, Naomi. The kitchen sound the dishwasher Marcella had started at 7:30 became very loud and very far away at the same time. She found the second mortgage. In January, she did not tell me she had found it. She took 32 of my Ambien on a Tuesday afternoon and lay down on the chaise in the sunroom and waited. The hospice paperwork I had you sign at 18 was after. The cancer was already there. It would have killed her in 6 months. She decided not to give it 6 months. She decided not to give me 6 months. I have let you believe what I told you because I could not. I could not. He did not finish. Naomi stood in the doorway of her father's bedroom and did not cry. She had spent 8 years not crying in this house. She was not going to start in front of him. Sign the counteroffer, she said. Or do not. I am leaving either way. She turned around. She walked down the staircase. She picked up the FedEx envelope from the Demaloon table. She put it in the kitchen trash compactor and ran the compactor for 14 seconds. She picked up her suitcase, which she had packed at 5:12 that morning, and she walked out the front door of the only home she had ever known. Marcella was already in the driveway with 2 suitcases of her own. They did not say anything. They got in the car. The KH Acquisitions office on the 43rd floor of a glass building on Park Avenue had no name on the door. There was a receptionist named Hannah who did not look up when they walked in. There was a conference room with a view of the East River and a single black folder on the table. Naomi signed her name on page 7 at 1:09 p.m. Friday afternoon. Ji-hoon was not in the room. He had flown to Seoul at 6 a.m. Min-jae was the witness. Marcus Hartwell, the outside counsel, 53 years old, black, Yale Law class of 1996, the only other black person on the entire 43rd floor, was the notary. When the seal came down on the page, Hartwell looked at her once, briefly, over the rim of his reading glasses and said, "Welcome to the work, Miss Okafor." That was the third layer. Not a public declaration. Not a husband. A peer, in the room where the real decisions happened, telling her she had walked through a door that had been closed to women who looked like her for the entire history of the building she was standing in. She nodded. She did not cry there either. She cried in the car. The car was a black GMC Yukon with tinted windows that Min-jae was driving north on the Hutchinson River Parkway at 2:47 p.m. Marcella was in the front passenger seat with her eyes closed. Naomi in the back with the signed folder on her lap and her phone face down on the seat beside her. She cried the way she had not allowed herself to cry in 8 years. Not the polite, controlled crying of a woman managing her face, but the heaving, ugly, mouth-open crying of a person who had just learned that the foundation she had built her entire adult life on top of was a lie her father had told her at the worst possible moment of her life. Her mother had not been taken from her. Her mother had left. There was a difference, and the difference had been hidden from her for 8 years, and the hiding was its own kind of wound. Min-jae did not look in the rearview mirror. He did not turn on music. He did not offer a tissue. He simply drove the speed limit and let her have the back seat the way you let someone have a room. After 11 minutes, she stopped. She wiped her face on the inside of her sleeve. She picked up her phone. She opened her notes app and she wrote one sentence, which she did not send to anyone. The work is the inheritance. Then she put the phone away. They crossed into Connecticut at 3:38 p.m. The estate at Caldwell Heights came into view through a stand of black walnut trees at 3:51, a 1923 limestone house, 14,000 square feet, the kind of property that did not announce itself because it did not need to. A woman in a gray dress was standing at the top of the front steps with her hands folded at her waist. Her name was Mrs. Garrett. She had been the head of household at Caldwell Heights for 23 years. She did not smile. Behind her, just inside the open front door, stood a man in his 60s in a dark suit, very still, very upright, watching the car come up the drive with the flat attention of a man who had already decided what he thought of its passenger and was simply waiting for her to give him a reason to confirm it. Choi Sung-ho, Ji-hoon's uncle, the man who had buried his brother and his nephew's wife in the same 18 months, and who had sworn on both graves that he would not bury anyone else. Naomi opened the car door. She stepped out into the gravel drive in the flats she had worn to the reception, and the same white shirt she had been wearing for 16 hours. She walked up the steps with her suitcase in her hand. She'd not know it yet, but the next 90 days would decide whether she got to keep the name on the folder, the work she had just inherited, and the life she had just chosen, or whether the man at the top of the steps would, by Christmas, succeed in removing every trace of her from a house that had not yet decided to let her in. Choi Sung-ho closed the door of the estate office behind him with the careful click of a man who intended to conduct a private conversation. It was 4:18 p.m. on the Monday following her arrival. He did not sit. Naomi did not stand up. She had spent 8 years standing up for men who walked into rooms. She had decided, somewhere on the Hutchinson Parkway, that she would never do it again for a man who had not earned it. Miss Okafor, I will be direct with you. Please. My nephew is a good man. He is also a man who has spent 3 years grieving his wife and trusting the wrong people with his estate. He is not at present making decisions from his best judgment. I am here to tell you that I do not think he made one on Thursday night. You believe choosing me was an error. I believe choosing you was an impulse. A well-intentioned one, perhaps, but an impulse nonetheless. He folded his hands behind his back. You are a capable young woman from a bankrupt family with no social standing, no protective network, no understanding of the kind of people who would have killed your father on Tuesday if you had not signed that folder on Friday. Yu Jin had all of those things and they killed her anyway. You have none of them and you walked into this house in flat shoes and a wrinkled shirt. She looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Choi, I have spent 8 years keeping a 31-room property from foreclosure while being told it ran itself. I read the Department of Financial Services consent order in the folder at 1:46 a.m. on Friday. I know exactly who killed your daughter-in-law. I also know that the only reason I am sitting in this chair instead of in a federal courtroom next year is that your nephew read me correctly on Thursday, and I read him correctly on Friday. I do not need you to like me. I need you to watch me work for 90 days. After that, if you still want me gone, I will go. The silence stretched. He nodded once. He walked out. He did not say goodbye. The 90 days were not graceful. By the end of the second week, Naomi had restructured 4 vendor contracts at Caldwell Heights and identified $230,000 in annual leakage being routed through a subsidiary fund manager named Daniel Ahn, who was quietly let go on a Wednesday and did not contest his severance. By the end of the second month, she had read a single line of an old easement on a property in Litchfield County that Marcus Hartwell had missed, and had, by doing so, blocked a $2.4 million boundary claim from a neighbor that would have set the family back a decade. By the end of the third month, Choi Sung-ho had stopped referring to her as my nephew's choice in front of the family council. He had begun saying Miss Okafor in the tone he reserved for people whose names carried their own weight. He did not apologize, but on a Tuesday in late April, a leather-bound notebook appeared on her desk. Brown calfskin, no note. She knew without having to ask that it had belonged to his brother. That it had been carried through 3 decades of family meetings. That giving it away was the closest he was ever going to come. She kept it on the second shelf of her office. She did not write in it. She did not need to. It was enough that it was there. The Park Jung problem was resolved more quietly than the news would later suggest. In early March, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey unsealed an indictment against 3 executives of Greylock Holdings, LLC, on charges of conspiracy to launder money in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1956. The Ardmore estate was named in the indictment as a targeted but unconsummated acquisition. Reginald Okafor was named as a cooperating witness. He had, at Naomi's insistence and through a lawyer she had hired for him out of her own first paycheck, walked into the Newark field office on the Tuesday after she left and given them every email he had. He kept the Ardmore. He kept it the way a man keeps a house he is no longer allowed to redecorate. KH Acquisitions held the controlling 51%. Naomi signed every operational document. Her father had a desk, a business card, and the kind of dignified silence that men who have lost everything sometimes mistake for peace. Some weeks she thought he had earned it. Other weeks she thought he had not. Both things were true at the same time, which was, she had come to understand what forgiveness usually looked like before anyone decided to name it. Brielle came in November. She did not arrive in cream silk. She arrived in jeans and a black hoodie and no makeup, and she stood in the foyer of Caldwell Heights with her arms folded across her chest, like a woman who had decided, on the drive up, that she was not going to cry. Papa took out $180,000 in my name in 2021, through a credit union in Mount Vernon. I found the file last week. I don't know what to do. Naomi looked at her sister. You're going to sit down. Marcella is going to make you tea. I am going to call a lawyer named Renee Okonkwo who handles identity theft restoration for women of color out of an office in Harlem. She is going to fix it. You are going to pay her back over 18 months, not because you owe her, but because the next time you sit across from a man who is offering to fix something, you are going to know what it feels like to fix it yourself first. Brielle sat down on the bench by the door. I was angry for a long time, she said. I know. I think I was angry because you were always right and no one wanted to say it, including me. Naomi did not answer right away. She was thinking about a third step on a staircase in Westchester, and a sister in a cream gown, and the careful arranged expression of a woman who had been raised to believe her face was her only currency. She was thinking about how long it had taken Brielle to figure out that the currency had never actually belonged to her. Come in, she said. Marcella made tea. A year passed. The Ardmore estate was renovated under the supervision of an architect Naomi hired out of Brooklyn. The rooms her grandmother had decorated in 1989 were preserved. The rest of the building was rebuilt around them. Her father gave the opening remarks at the reopening reception in October. He spoke for 4 minutes. He did not mention Greylock. He did not mention Han Eugene. He thanked his daughter Naomi by name, twice in front of 300 guests, and when he sat down, he did not look at her, because he could not yet do that without something showing on his face that he did not want anyone to see. That was fine. He had said her name. That was more than he had given her in 9 years. The last scene of this story is not, finally, a wedding. There was a wedding. It was very small. It took place at the Connecticut house on the Saturday after Christmas, attended by 22 people, none of whom were reporters. The Korean tabloids did not get the photograph. They did, however, receive an official portrait from the Han Group Communications office the following Monday. Naomi Okafor seated at the head of the conference table on the 43rd floor, wearing a Tom Ford suit, hands folded over a single sheet of paper, the caption reading Naomi Okafor, Chief Operating Officer, KH Acquisitions LLC. Nothing else. The Korean readers understood the message. The American readers did not need to. The last scene is this. It is a Wednesday afternoon in February. Ji-hoon is in Seoul. Naomi is alone in the office at Caldwell Heights signing the final transfer of the Ardmore Estate's renovation closeout to her father's operating company. She finishes. She sets the pen down. She looks at the clock. She has, for the first time in 11 years, 11 minutes with nothing on the schedule. She does not know what to do with 11 minutes. She sits. After a moment, Marcella comes in with a tray. 2 cups. 1 pot. She sets it on the desk. She sits down in the chair across from Naomi without being asked. 2 women. In a room built 100 years ago for men who would never have let either of them through the door. Drinking tea on a Wednesday afternoon. Saying nothing, owing no one their time. The work, it turned out, had been the inheritance, and the inheritance had finally finished being earned. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to ask you something honest before you close this video. Have you ever been Naomi? The one running the books at midnight, while someone else gave the toast at dinner. The one who knew where every dollar went, every promise was owed, every quiet thing was breaking, while everyone in the room thanked someone else for keeping it together. The one whose mother left in a way no one let you grieve correctly. The one who was told your whole life. That being the steady one was its own reward when what you actually wanted, just once, was for someone to walk across the room and say your name out loud. Or, and this one is harder, have you ever been someone in that ballroom who did not notice her? Who saw a woman in a black uniform and a single low knot and a pair of small gold earrings and assumed she was staff and looked past her toward whoever was being introduced? There is no shame in that answer. Most of us have been both at different times in our lives. The work is learning to tell the difference. Tell me in the comments which one you saw yourself in tonight. Tell me the city you are watching from and the time on your phone right now. If this story moved you, if you know a Naomi in your own life, your sister, your mother, your coworker, yourself, share this video with her tonight. Don't explain it, just send it. And if you want more stories about the people who hold everything together until someone finally sees them, subscribe. There is another one coming next week. I will see you there.